Hey everyone, so we are in week 8, so it's right in the middle of the third module. Remember our modules, we have 5 modules of those 3 weeks put together. So that puts us right in the middle of the class, right? So this is where we've hit the peak. Everything's downhill from here. Not quite. This is where we've hit our pinnacle. And that means we've prepped a lot. We've created a good foundation, a good base. And so I don't think anyone's confused at this point. I think everyone's kind of figured it out and gotten it. The first few weeks are like, what are we doing anyway? How are we doing this? I think everybody's gotten that. I get the sense that we're where we need to be. And so really the question becomes, where are you at in your Odyssey development? Most people, I sense from especially last week's assignments or a couple weeks ago, as you went through your 3 lives and you spelled them out and you said, hey, here's where I'm thinking that I'm at. Here's what they are. Here's where my preparation is. Here's where I'm at. I get the sense that everybody's where they're comfortable with what you've got. And so now the question is, how do you go to that next step? How do you take these 3 lives and go to the next level? How do you merge them together? How do you look ahead and say, where do I want to be? What do I want to do? And this is a point of comfort and discomfort that all meshes together. But the real question is, what's next? What's next for you? How do you go to your next level? How do you move from, well, this is just another assignment to say, what are my goals? What do I want to do? And then just like January 1st to January 15th, setting new goals and then breaking them versus really making the shift. That's where this is different, and it has to be different. But the question becomes, how do you make that difference? So the current status is this. Previously, like I said, the last assignment was take a look at your current trajectory, your backup plan, and the no limits plan. And so right now, we're going to shift you into what I call MSU to GSD. We're going to make some stuff up to get some stuff done. It's called consulting. But that's where we're at. So here's some observations. When we take a look at this, what I've recognized is that most people do okay at the macro level. When we're looking at life holistically and we incorporate all these pieces at the 30,000 foot level, even the 20,000 foot level, we have some broad views. Everyone's pretty comfortable with that because they're like, hey, let's look out here. Let's take a look at the distance. This is fine. But when we get down to the specifics, where we're at today, where do we need to go? What are the steps that we have to take to get from where we're at to where we need to get to? When I'm telling you, hey, we need to have some detailed outcomes or results, what does it take to get from here to there over the next 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, even 10 years? That's tough. That's pretty tough. You see, because in all but about a few cases, your current situation, your current trajectory, and the backup plans, they're pretty similar. Here's why. In your current state, you know where you're at. You know what your current trajectory is. This is comfort. Why is it comfort? Because, to be honest, you are your own subject matter expert. You knew what it took to get to where you're at. You know where you're at. You know what the surroundings are. You know how you got here. You're also the subject matter expert on the backup plan. Why? Because chances are this backup plan is what you've done before. You may have done it in the past. You may have done it in an earlier stage of your career. You know what to do. You know what you're good at and what you've done in the past. That's a comfort zone. The no limits tends to be a little dreamy and a little vague because that's something that you may have wanted to do, something that interests you, but you haven't done there. You haven't been there before. You haven't done it before. And you've always said, I wonder if, I wonder how, I wonder. But you've never set a clear strategy on how to get there. And so there's not really a good start to defining this path because we've always put it in the sense of, I wonder if, or it'd be nice to, or using that kind of language. It's not clear language. So in this case, what happens is that the current trajectory, the past, or the fallback plan, that's real because you've been there, done that, or have done it in the past. But the no limits plan, it's a little unrealistic because you've never made it tangible. So here's where the challenge is. It's your mindset. You haven't experienced it. You haven't lived it. Because of that, it's not real to you. If you want this change to happen, it's got to start right up here. Until this makes it happen, it's not going to happen. You got to get past yourself to actually believe that it's going to happen. And that's your first step. You see, you got to get past this whole notion of getting in your own way. So you got to ask that question, what's getting you in the way of your own shift, right? Sometimes we step in a whole pile of shift along the way and we say, oh, look, I have shift in my way. I can't go any further, or I got to dodge that. We have a whole bunch of shift that gets in our lives, right? We deal with shift all the time. But look, shift happens. And we have to figure out how to deal with this shift in our lives, because that's what it's going to take. If we want to do something different, if we want to be somewhere different in our lives, we're going to have to deal with the shift, because that's what it's going to take to get from where we're at to a different place. Otherwise, it's what they say, you can't keep doing what you're doing and expect different results. It doesn't happen that way. You're going to have to change to get a different result. That's it. So questions become, right, what's getting in the way of your confidence to get you from where you're at to where you want to get to? Most common answer is fear. Well, what happens if? What happens if I fail? Okay, so what happens if you fail? What does failure mean to you? What does it mean? Answer the question. What does failure mean to you? And what happens if you fail? My gosh, I can tell you 52 ways not to do business. Why? Because we flat out failed. I will tell you, if you want to find out how to do business or how to start your own thing or go do it, you should go talk to the person who has failed multiple times before they became successful. The person who did it right the first time and is successful, they were lucky, or they had somebody else who funded their way. They had somebody else who mentored them along the way, and they got lucky. You want to really know how to do this? Go find somebody who sucked it first. Go find somebody who did poorly first, who failed miserably first, and then got back up and won. That's the person who you want as your mentor. But you got to struggle through this. But what is the struggle? When those struggles become barriers and don't let you go proceed further, that's going to be the challenge. You see, when you understand what your primary goal is and where you want to get to, that's going to be the first thing. It's back to my 3 questions. What do you want? Why do you want it? And then how do you get there? If you understand what you want, and the passion is there to say, that's why I want it, the how will come. But the real question is your why. Is your why big enough? If it doesn't scare you, it's not big enough. Seriously. I shared that story in the previous week. If your goal isn't big enough to scare you, it's not big enough. Think through that one. All right, we'll come back to that one in a sec. But it starts with what you want. You got to describe your life. Now, here's the exercise that we go through. You got to just pause. Pause for a few minutes, even a few minutes. I hope you spend a few more times than this, because this is your life you're talking about. I want you to look ahead as far as you can. Go to 5 years out, 10 years out, 20 years out if you can. Some of us think 20 years is like, wow, that's... It's never too late, by the way. It's never too late. But pause out there. I want you to just pause, but close your eyes on this. You got to close your eyes and just think for a second. What's it going to be like in 20 years or in 10 years or even 5 years from now? I don't want you to think about your job. Don't think about your career. Don't think about what you're doing in terms of career. I want you to think about your life. It's got to be tangible. So to do this, you can't think about the stuff. Don't think about the stuff. Don't think about the vehicle that you're in the sense of your job. What's it going to be like? So close your eyes and think. You're out on the front porch or wherever your Zen place is. Where are you at? What does your house look like? Who's with you? Is it a spouse, kids, friends, grandkids maybe? What are you doing in your time by yourself there, or in your, we'll call it free time, your enjoyable time, your happiness time? We have our happiness journal. Your happy time. When you're fully energized, what are you doing in that moment? Who's around you? Breathe the air and tell me what it smells like. What are the feelings that you have 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now? When you get to this moment and reflect on it, I would say spend 5-10 minutes here. But really see where you're at. And then write it down. What does it look like? And how does it feel? How can you tell that you've arrived to this place? Again, I'm not talking about money. I'm not talking about your career. I'm not talking about the vehicle. What does that look like? Write that moment down. Because that's what you want. That's what you want. Now, when you describe that, then you ask the question, how do you get there? If that is the identity that you want to get to, and if your current trajectory and the things that you're doing now will get you there, all right, you're on a pretty good course. Awesome. And you can just enhance it with the other things that you're doing. If what you're doing now cannot get you there, we need to make some choices. We need to make some adjustments. If you, in that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, could come back to you today and tell you one thing, what would they tell you? That you in that moment that you just envisioned comes back to you and says one thing, and they could give you one message, what would it be? Would it be stay the course? Don't do anything? Don't listen to anything that they're talking about in this class? Is that what they would say? Or would they say, you have got to go play all out. Go take the chance. Go make the course. Take action right now and go play big. What would you tell yourself if the you from 20 years from now in that moment comes back and they could tell you one thing? What would it be? You see, as you go through your 3 lives, consider this, because this week, what you're asking for feedback from your peers, and you're giving feedback from your peers. But listen to them. But you want to listen and consider which plan excites you the most, which plan maybe still drains you a little bit or concerns you. Maybe something in here is safe. Others may appear to be risky. But then you're going to go into prototyping next. And what is prototyping? Prototyping is just saying, all right, here's the life. Play it all out. What does this look like if I keep going over the next few years? What does that look like? Or as I then merge some of these things, what does that look like? How does it feel? How does it appear as I keep going with this? Those are some considerations. Give each of these lives an identity. I don't know, call them something. Here's Bob, here's Jill, I don't care, whatever it looks like. But what did you name it? Or come up with a tag name so you can talk about what these are, but describe them. And then ask the question, how can you learn more about this if you need to answer a few more questions? But then through each of these lives, and then as you combine these things, consider this. How do you accomplish your life in each of these tracks? And then, what options are there for you to engage each of these? Do you want to pursue these? If you're in the current trajectory and this is awesome, how do you take it to the next level? How do you accomplish this and make sure that you stay on track, because it's so easy to get diverted? But then this is where you get into the brainstorming process. Throughout this week and next week, you start brainstorming. Throw some spaghetti on the fridge and see what sticks. And really the whole concept here is you ask this question, how do you optimize each of these alternatives? And then you're going to come up with these ideas and just start going. And this is where you start looking at these planned contents and you start to throw out ideas. Clarify, what does this look like? What are the settings? What are the details? What are some options to consider? What haven't you thought of? And these are some of the same questions that you should be drawing from your peers this week as you're asking for input and some feedback. And this is also the same information you should be sharing with them as you say, have you thought about this? Have you considered this? And this is where we're just going boom, 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 tossing out ideas. Just drop out, even on the bad ideas. I say go for the bad ideas. The bad ideas, even the worst ideas, the very worst ideas, write them down. And here's why. The bad ideas will oftentimes, and even the worst ideas possible, oftentimes will then go to the next least bad ideas, and they actually go to the most probable ideas that then become actually the best ideas ever. Seriously, I kid you not. The best things that I've ever done and the most innovative things usually come from the worst ideas possible. Absolutely. And had I not run with those bad ideas, we'd never make change happen. My colleagues, anybody who knows me, knows that the idea that we're probably going to go with is when I approach them and I say, all right, so I've got a bad idea. And they usually sit down and they say, okay, what is it and how much is it going to cost? I said, no. This one I'm actually looking for your feedback on. And they know that I'm going to ask them to come back to me and stew on it for a day. But that's where the best stuff comes from. But ask your team and then seek feedback. Don't just tell them this is what we're going to do. Ask for feedback. And this is where you're going into these areas. Dig in. Where's some excitement? Where's some exciting pieces on this? And really dig in and say, all right, what are some pieces? But ask other people. Don't just ask your colleagues out here. Ask your spouse, ask your friends, ask your kids. They'll come up with some crazy ideas. Dig into the one, especially the one where if money or time is no object, dig deeper. Have some fun with this and don't excuse yourself. Don't talk yourself out of it before you do this. Don't do that at all. The ones where it says, it probably isn't going to work, but how cool would it be if those are the ones that have to go on this list. Have to. Like, you only get one life, so write this stuff down. And then keep on going on the stuff. All right, your goal next week is you're going to come up with your top 12 list. It's going to come from all 3 lives. You're just going to go boom, 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 boom. It's not equally proportionate. You don't have to come up with 4 ideas per life. You're going to come up with your top 12 out of all of these. Pick the top 12 and see which one's like, that's pretty cool. That's a good list. From there, we're going to crunch out the top 5. Now, you got to come up with at least one idea from each of the areas. So they don't have to be proportionate. You can have just like one of the ideas coming from a couple of the areas if you need to, but at least one idea has to come from each of the areas. But anyway, in the end, you're going to come up with 5 ideas that are going to be your top 5. Okay, that's going to be next week. That's going to be week 9. So that's how you're gonna crunch this thing out. But then this is where it starts to get into some fun. You see, this is my scatter, and I haven't really. I forgot to revise this. Sorry about that. But this is where you can start to plan. You look backwards and say, all right, well, here's what my track was. I mean, in my case, hey, I was an HR professional. I have this as my track record. But if I look at what my track record was and say this is going to define my future, it's like, I mean, I'm the scatterbrain of just going all over the place. But this is where experience doesn't dictate your future. In my past, hey, I didn't even know what HR was until I got into grad school. I mean, I took my undergrad was in poli-sci because I was focusing on international business. Why? Because I knew I was going to get my MBA, I thought for sure I'm going to go into international business. Cool. First semester, it was the second semester in grad school. We have this visiting professor from University of Washington comes down and by age 24, he has his doctorate. He and his friends secure funding. 6 months, they are on the road. They travel. They set up import-export contacts. And for the next 20 years, he does import-export, international business. One of the comments he makes was, hey, for 20 years, I'm on the road. I'm home like maybe 3 months out of the year. Weekend here, a couple of days there. Well, at that point, I've got like 3 kids with the 4th on the way. I'm like, that ain't going to work. Especially with the way that we do family. We're very close to family. Family's around. I can't take my wife and kids out of the country for years at a time or on the road. It's not going to work. I know other people do, but that's just not our style. So I'm like, At that point, I had an internship at the university, at Willamette University in HR. And it's like, Well, then I had to step back and say, what do you want? I want to influence the organization. I want to make change. I want to do some cool stuff for people. I want to get stuff done and make stuff happen. I want to be an influencer. I want to be able to do some cool stuff. Then I realized HR is at the nerve center of the organization, can actually do this stuff. Cool. And I pursued that. But that's where we get into it. I do HR. Next thing I know, I'm consulting sooner than I should have, but I'm consulting. Well, then I'm consulting for myself. Well, then University of Phoenix, right? I'm teaching for them. 1997. I've been teaching for almost over 25 years for different universities. Well, next thing I know, they come to town in Boise and they say, "Hey, come join us on the administrative side." Done admin on their side. I go to work for all kinds of different experiences. Always had clients, but since I've consulted for over 25 years. Had done work for hundreds of companies, thousands of people. But because of this experience, right, we just keep going one thing to the next. I'm in consulting, I'm out of consulting, always had clients, but next thing you know, as I go from one stack to the next, right, I'm back down to California. Sorry, I'd never do HR in California. Next year, I'm in California with multiple unions. Then what? I come back, right? Then I come back to Wagstaff, and Wagstaff says, hey, here you are. I come back, we do this, and then what? I'm like back to consulting. I'm Wagstaff and consulting and teaching. It's crazy. It's crazy. But here's what happens. And someone would say, how on earth do you do this stuff? Why do you do this stuff? You have no track. I've had to take a step back and say, what do I want? How do I combine my passion of people? How do I combine my passion of leadership development? How do I combine my passion for working with kids? I've done scouting for 30 years. I've coached football for 13 seasons with my kids. Love the outdoors. I love all these things. How do you combine all that? What I recognize out now is that how do I combine this is simple. We need to develop workers for the future. We don't have a choice if we don't do something proactive. And I can affect that through K-12, working with the kids to get this bridge directly into workforce. I can work with universities to make this happen. I can work with businesses to make this happen. And I can work with multiple organizations to make this happen. Everything I do aligns in the same direction. It all works. So, I know it's crazy. But what happens is that I still create this base to make sure that I'm in alignment with what matters most. Family, the fitness, the physicality. Yeah, I mean, the story was right. I had to drop 200 pounds to make sure that I can live long enough. So, and that's there. Having fun, finances, got to make sure that we live. But always future focused to say, what's the next thing? Keeping the balance is going to keep the balance. Now, some of you are saying, hey, this is just too crazy, Wade. I can't follow your track, and I don't want you to follow my track. You got to follow your track. In my track, anyone who looks at me and they say, you're never going to be done, and I say, you're absolutely right. Because in my case, my desired future state is that I will never retire. You say, that's stupid. I said, I know. Other people want to get to the finish line and retire and then relax for the rest of their life. And that's cool stuff. In my case, I saw what happens when my father and my father-in-law retired. They stopped doing things and they fell apart. That wasn't them. But I also saw, when I saw, Donald Kirkpatrick, who was the father of modern training and development. He created the Kirkpatrick model for modern training and evaluation. I was at a conference for the Association of Talent Development. It was probably 2016, 2017. He's 89 years old. We're in Orlando. And he's still giving a workshop. This guy's been pumping out content for years, and by this point his kids have taken over his consulting business. But at 89 years old, I'm attending his workshop. The place is packed. It's standing room only in the biggest room that they could get. And at 89 years old, he's still giving fresh content. I'm sitting back going, that's how I want to go. I'm going that way. Had a similar experience with Stephen Covey years before that, as I attended a workshop with him, and he was in his mid 60s by that point, and he's still giving content, and I'm like, that's how I want to go. Between that combo, that set my vision to say, life is short. God put me here for a purpose. That's how I'm going. Now, it drives my wife nuts, but I just make sure that we go to a lot of places each year just to keep her happy and her feet in the sand. But that's the combo that we have. That's what drives me. Whatever drives you is your passion, and you got to make sure that you do it. So, from this point, when we ask that question of what can you do, what do you want to do, that's where your desired state has to come in, and you've got to figure that out. I know, I'm rambling. This is where it goes, but this is what it's all about. As you consider your brainstorming, also consider what skills you need to develop. Here's where your future state is. Don't say no to anything. Whatever you want to do, don't talk yourself out of it. Say, what if the answer was yes? If the answer is yes, and the question is how, it will change your perspective. Somebody somewhere is doing what you want to do. Somebody somewhere was older than you, younger than you, had more money than you, had less money than you, was more qualified than you, was less qualified than you. Somebody somewhere was in your spot, exactly, and they've done it. Whatever you think you can't do, somebody else did it already. Somebody else did it with fewer resources, with less time, and in a worse situation. Whatever you think is a new idea is an old idea. Somebody else has already been there, done that. And I'm not saying that to rub it in or to say that or to minimize your desire at all. The reason I share that is because there's a model out there, there's a mentor out there, somebody somewhere has done exactly what you're telling yourself right now that you can't. What does that mean to you? Next week, as you build into this week, toss out your ideas to the universe, listen, ask additional questions and say, what do you think? Listen, and also share your perspectives. You may have the only perspective about something that they're going to need, so share freely. Get your list of 12, narrow that down to 5, and develop those. Have some fun with it. See where it takes you. But this is where it hits home. Years ago, my wife was joking and said, it'd be cool is if you could just do something, do whatever you want, so that eventually you could just work anywhere in the world. You could write a book from the beach. So we were in Costa Rica a few years ago, and I had my computer out. I was actually teaching class one time. In fact, I was teaching I was teaching 593 one time from the beach. I don't think you guys were in that class, but it just happened that we were in Costa Rica and I had to teach, and so I got the Wi-Fi and I was teaching from the beach. I tried to put the back screen on, but I finally just gave up and had to show them where I was at. But of course, she's giving me this hard time. It's like, honey, you're working. It's like, honey, I'm working from the beach like you told me to. So then we had to figure out how to compromise. Now, it's not a win-win. That was total compromise. But that's how it's become. But this, I know I had to throw in an Everest story here somewhere. It was, we're probably at about 14 or 15,000 feet on this particular day. And I had class. I was teaching class. It was a 3-week process, and I was teaching class, and I couldn't not teach. I can't just say, sorry guys, I can't do it. So I found the lightest tablet possible to take with me, and I heard that there was Wi-Fi, but I'll be honest, I was just taking a shot at it and hoping for the best. Turns out because of the satellite connection, right, they have satellite Wi-Fi. That's some of the best Wi-Fi connection I've ever had anywhere. So we're at about 14 or 15,000 feet. And I'm sitting here, I'm punching out, I'm teaching class near Everest. And so my Sherpa, he's coming over, he's like, dude, what are you doing? Because, nobody's got a laptop out. Nobody's got anything out. And I'm sitting here and I'm cranking on it because I have my little keyboard connected to the tablet, and I'm typing away, and it's cold, and I'm cold, I'm freezing, but I'm just typing away. It's like, what are you doing? And my son says, he's teaching class. He's a professor for Washington State University. He's over here teaching class. And the Sherpa just drops his jaw. He's like, I've done this 100 times. He's been a Sherpa for life. He's made this trip 100 times or more. He says, in my life, I have never, ever seen anybody teaching class from Everest. I said, well, there you go. Again, going back to my the whole piece of doing something that I want to do from anywhere in the world. Teach class from Everest. So from your perspective, you figure out what you want to do. If I can teach college, if I can teach the university from Everest, you can do whatever the crap you want. So there's no saying no. You can do what you want. You don't have to wait. You're not going to give up anything. You're not going to fail. You can do whatever you want. The question, right? The question isn't how can I? The question, it starts with the answer yes. The answer is yes. Then the question becomes how. Start with that. Let's throw the ideas out there. Let's have some fun, and you can do this. All right. Thanks for joining me on my diatribe, and let's get going. Go have some fun. Let's make this successful, and do not get in your own way. Let's start today. Let's go. All right. Here we go.